Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gene Wilder. I told you he's shy. You're embarrassing him.
But you can do more if you want to.
So why a novel? After all that you've done, writing's hard. Why a novel?
Well, I'd been asked to do a book maybe 3 times. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and I said, no, I'm not ready for it yet. I don't know what I would write about. And Karen, my wife, and her mom, and I went to California supposedly for 2 weeks, and her mother got deathly ill, and we stayed for 2 months, and I thought if I don't do something artistic, I'll go crazy. So I started writing down all the ironies in my life that led to something else. Some of them were horrible things that led to a good thing, and vice versa. But I saw the structure for a book, and that was Kiss Me Like a Stranger.
The memoir.
A memoir. And then it was just like it got into my vein and into an artery, I think, because I wanted to go on writing. I didn't want to act anymore. My rule of thumb is if the bell goes off when I read a script, I can tell by page 25. If it goes off, I say, I've got to do this. But the bell hasn't gone off for a long time because I'm tired of movies that are just based on special effects, on the F word and the mother F and the effing and the...
This is a Jewish venue, so he's going to be polite.
I am. And to all of you watching, I'm being very polite, but it's the truth. Mm-hmm. And I haven't read anything that I really wanted to do for so long, and now I find it's much more comforting to sit in my study, write starting at 10:30 or so, come out after an hour and a half, get a quick kiss from my wife, make a cup of tea, go back in, write, come out for lunch, which is just a bowl of soup or a yogurt or something, go back till 3:30, 3:45, and then call it a day of writing. And I enjoy that. I enjoy it more than the thought of acting again.
Interesting.
And if you want to know the truth, if you ask an actor, why did you act? Why do you want to act? What got you into it? I don't think most of them know the real reasons. After 7.5 years of analysis, I have a fairly good idea why. Analyst said, it's better than running around naked in Central Park, isn't it? I hadn't ever thought of it that way, but I got the point. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to. It's nothing but rejection, unless you're one of the few 5% that hit it and you can make a living and all that. But rejection and then having to prove yourself all the time.
Books get rejected, but
yeah, but
yours
then I
have
say,
been
but
too good.
I'm not a writer. I'm an actor.
It's a no-win. It's a must-win.
And I can say, well, or I'm a painter, or if they don't like the painting, I'm a writer. I always have an out.
Well, speaking of writing, you said your inspirations are the simplicity of Ernest Hemingway and Jean Renoir. Could you amplify that?
Yes, I can. I used to write, like a lot of writers, highfalutin, long sentences, complications, And I wrote a lot of screenplays, and even in those I started to simplify and simplify. But reading Hemingway many times, especially For Whom the Bell Tolls and A Farewell to Arms, The Old Man and the Sea, and A Movable Feast, when he said he would go to the local brasserie and he didn't want to go on writing unless he could write one true sentence. And if he got one true sentence, he'd continue. And his thoughts that he expressed then were simple, declarative sentences. And I tried to do that. And the other person who influenced me so much was Jean Renoir, the film director. But he also wrote Renoir, My Father, and a book that I don't think many people have read called The Notebooks of Captain George. So simple and so deep. And I said, well, if I could come close to improving my writing to where it's simple, easy to read, like I'm talking to the people, and yet have it also be deep. That was what I was trying for.
Well, you succeeded in My French Whore. This novel is extraordinary. You said something about how you felt about city lights. Do you remember your quote? You said it was funny and sad, and then it was both.
Yes.
And I felt that way reading the book. Maybe you could summarize the plot of the book, and then I'd like to ask you a couple of things about it.
Well, a youngish man is in a sad marriage of 4 years, and he decides to enlist in the army, 1918. He gave all the money to his wife, and then he was sent to France, and because his mother and father were German and came over to the States, to Milwaukee, he spoke fluent German, and he's asked to interrogate this fellow who says he's a corporal, but the company commander doesn't believe him. And they said, maybe if you talk to him, give him drinks, give him sandwiches, anything you want, the character, the hero's name is Paul Peachy, and Peachy talks with him, and the fellow starts to loosen up, the German, and Peachy finds out that he is a German spy, that is a spy for Germany. And he's tired. He wasn't captured. He was tired of the war, and he knew that Germany was going to lose. And the next day, Peachy's company goes out to attack the 200 yards away, the German company, and he sees all of his friends getting mowed down by machine guns. He runs away, he runs to a woods, and he's captured, lined up against a tree, and they're going to shoot him. And something, maybe the amateur actor in him, takes over, and he starts screaming at the sergeant in charge, swearing at him in German, all in German. Take me to your commander. Is this what you do when you capture someone? You don't ask for how many tanks, how many horses, how many cavalry, what? And from that time on, he poses as the man he interrogated. He poses as the spy, who is actually a colonel in the German army. And then he's introduced to this woman who looks and acts and makes up like a whore. And he's not attracted to her. He's put off by it all. But after a while, she sees something in him that isn't the German spy. She doesn't know he's just a little schmuck from Milwaukee. But he sees something in her that isn't the whore. And he finds out why she's doing what she's doing. And they start to feel strong love. And
okay, we're not going to tell
yeah,
any more.
That's
You
all.
can buy the book afterward. But two things really occurred to me when reading this book. One is that I see you in it.
Yeah.
Do you see you in it?
Yes.
And I see your life in it, which is peculiar to say about a World War I story about a soldier. But tell me what you see, and then I'll tell you what I see.
Okay. I had the idea for this story 38 years ago. I was alone and terribly lonely in Paris at the beginning of my career in films. And I said, well, I'll write it as a screenplay. I came back to New York, I wrote the screenplay, and it was rotten. But the plot was good. I knew that, but I put it away. And this is the hard part, but also, in a way, the easy part. In 1999, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I was at Sloan Kettering, and I knew there was a pretty good chance that I might die, and I wasn't afraid of dying. I didn't think about it that much, but it had taken me so long to find Karen. I said, it's not fair to her. If I go, she's strong, she'll get by, but it's just not fair. And maybe that's why I made it through, because I'm one of the lucky ones. Now, 7.5 years later, I'm...
Right.
But when I... Thank you. But when I came out of the hospital and I wanted to write, I said, where's that screenplay, the rotten screenplay that I wrote 38 years ago? And I had donated it to the University of Iowa. They said, it doesn't matter how good or bad, just for students to learn how you advanced in your writing. And I got it back. I read it again. I said, yeah, it is a rotten screenplay, but the story is good. And so I started to write it as a novel. And now I'm happy with how it came out.
Well, I see in it, these are the aspects of your life that to me are reflected in it. Your experience in the Milwaukee Players.
Yes.
The character starts there. Mm-hmm. The sexual echoes. You write in the memoir that your first wife was sexually unresponsive, quote, that you made love every 6 months like clockwork.
That's right.
And then in the novel, you say about the protagonist's marriage, the romantic part faded away. And in fact, that's what propelled him to join the Army.
That's right.
So your experience, again, is reflected in that. Your taste in women. You had a meaningful affair years ago with Gunilla, a Danish woman, and the affair resulted in a pregnancy that was terminated. You wrote about it, or I wouldn't be saying this. And you described Gunilla as sweet and affectionate. And the woman who's the protagonist's love interest, Annie, though she's dressed like a whore or made up like a whore, you also describe her as sweet and affectionate. And she favors certain colors, lavender, pale blues, soft pinks. And that somehow made me flash on Karen, who, if any of you recognize her, is wearing a deep lavender tonight.
Yeah, always.
So clearly she's in it. Your military school experience or your wartime experience seem to be in it. And I'm interested in how, as a novelist, you imagine and yet utilize yourself, because being a first novelist myself, that's a fascinating process to me.
Well, one thing that influenced it was 38 years ago, I thought I would be playing the part. And so I'm saying, oh, I could do this, I could do that. But I found that as I was writing, it was impossible not to have my own feelings go into the character I'm writing about, because otherwise I thought it would be fake. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be as honest as possible. And even looking at someone, looking at a naked woman, I didn't have to say, I wonder how he'd feel. I was a virgin so
Till you were 22?
23.
23.
Yeah.
Wait, worse yet.
Yeah, worse yet. Yeah. But there was a reason why.
I know.
If you ask me,
Tell
I'll tell you.
Tell us. I knew that's coming.
Oh. When I was 8 years old, 7.5 or 8 years old, my mother had a heart attack. And this heavy-set doctor brought her home told her some things while she was lying in bed, and then came out to see me, and he grabbed me by the arm. It was summer, a hot day, and the sweat was dripping off of his face and falling onto my cheeks. And he said, "Don't ever get angry with your mother, because you might kill her." He was not very psychologically oriented. But the other thing he said was, try to make her laugh.
Try to make her laugh.
And that was a huge thing, although I didn't realize it at the time. But for the first time in my life, I tried consciously to make someone else laugh. And I knew I was very successful when she'd run to the bathroom and say, "Now look what you've made me do." And when you can you please your mother by doing something, it gives you confidence that you can please other people. And I think that's where the courage to make people laugh came from. But after I saw Death of a Salesman with Lee J. Cobb and Mildred Dunnick, I just turned 16. I didn't want to be a comedian I wanted to be an actor, maybe a comic actor, but an actor.
15 was a big year for you.
Yeah.
I noticed that was the year that you decided you wanted to be an actor in a big way, and you also went to the Art Institute when you were 15 in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, Van Gogh.
Right? And tell about that. That sort of kindled a whole new interest.
I went to see a movie. It was in black and white in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And before the movie started, they had a short subject, and it said, "The Paintings of Vincent van Gogh." I didn't know who that was. And they showed, I think, 23 paintings that it's like the hair was rising. That's how I got this hair. I was so struck by it I went to Chicago to go to the Art Institute to see the Van Gogh exhibit that was going on then. And I came back and I got some paints, oil paints then, and 2 brushes, a little linseed oil, and some stretched canvas, and I started painting.
Yeah, and the paintings are sublime. They're beautiful watercolors.
Now,
and Karen
thank
paints
you.
as well. You and Karen.
We started studying
Right.
watercolors at the same time.
And tap dancing together.
And yeah, but she's a much better tap dancer than I am.
The other thing I wanted to mention about the novel, and I hope I'm not imposing this, but to me, it really reflected a major theme in your life and work, and that is appearance versus reality. That things and people may not be what or who they seem to be. And that seemed to, in Willy Wonka, you insisted on that first scene. That's an embodiment of it. Tell about that.
You've done your homework, haven't you?
I had fun doing it.
I was offered the part of Willy Wonka in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and when the director, Mel Stewart, came to my house, apartment, and he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I like the script, except I'd like to add something to it. At the very beginning, when the audience sees Willy Wonka for the first time, I want to come out of a door with a cane and limp my way to the crowd. And they're all, "Oh, Willy Wonka, oh, he's a cripple. Oh, my God, who thought that? I never knew that, so fun." And they quiet down. And then Willy Wonka's cane gets stuck in a brick, and he starts to fall forward, and he does a forward somersault and jumps up, and the crowd cheers and applauds. And the director said, "What do you want to do that for?" And I said, "Because from that time on, no one will know whether I'm lying or telling the truth."
Brilliant.
And he said, "You mean if I say no, you won't do the picture?" I said, "I'm afraid that's the truth." And he said, "Well, you're going to stick it down. Okay, well, we'll do it then." And that's how it got in. And I would not have done it.
But you shot it the other way. You made one shot the other way, and then.
Oh, how did you know that? So he does about 6 takes, doing what I wanted. He said, do me a favor, just in case of an accident, do one without the cane. Just walk normally and see the crowd and so on. I should have known better. Uh-oh. And then the next day, David Wolper was there. He was producing it and, putting up the money for it. And Mel Stewart comes out and he says, he loved it. It's in. I said, and if he didn't love it? He said, well, then it would have been out.
Yeah, that's Hollywood.
That's Hollywood.
To push that disguise, appearance, reality, masquerade point a little further, in the novel, what looks like a German spy is a private in the American Army.
Right.
What looks like a courtesan in garish makeup is a sweet, affectionate, lovely woman. Now, in the movies, stay with me a minute. In Stir Crazy, the entire plot hinges on disguise that got you and Richard Pryor in chicken suits, right?
Yeah.
In Silver Streak, a low-life gangster masquerades as an art history professor. In Blazing Saddles, a black sheriff is misperceived as dumb when he's the smartest one in the movie, and the Waco Kid appears to be washed up, but he has the fastest hands, not just in the West, but in the world.
That's right, in the world.
And Frisco Kid, a rabbi, is misperceived as weak, like the Jews, when he's the bravest in the movie, and he misperceives the Amish as Jewish. And in the and in the producers, what looks like a flop is a hit. Now,
what do they all have in common?
What does that all mean in your life? All of that notion of pretense, that pretending is, in a way, safety, or allows you a certain freedom, or what attracts you to that theme?
There's one other I'll add to the list. It's Start the Revolution Without Me. And I play twins. Donald Sutherland plays twins, and I play twins. And I'm meek and shy, and I thought that's why I would want to do it. But then, when you see the twin, he's a mean bastard. Insane. And the same dynamic was going on there, too. And it turned out that I was better playing the mean one than I was in the mean shy, in the sweet shy one. But I'm always attracted to movies when I'm going to decide whether to do it or not, where that element is there. I don't think about it that way, but I realize in retrospect that that's what got me. Putting on an act. And that's what got me into acting, was putting on an act, because in life I wasn't funny, but I felt on stage or in the movies I could do whatever I wanted to. I was free.
There also seems to be an element in that of concern about being misperceived and misperceiving others. Can you mislead others and still find the truth in yourself? The difference between acting and being. And this was triggered by my reading the poem you wrote when you were in Inverness, your freshman summer. Do you remember the words of that poem?
Across 3,000 miles of sea, and through strange England smiling, and into a wee Scots Highland town, there is a boy who's crying. Oh, fool the world, he could, a man at 20 years, but all alone in that Highland town, there is a boy in tears. Yeah.
That boy in tears was you.
Yeah, that was me.
Why was he in tears at that point? You want to share a little of your mishigas with the group?
Is that a Catholic expression? Well, this is partly why it took 7.5 years of analysis, but when I was 18 and the hormones were raging, and I was at school, University of Iowa, and in spring, I think it was March 19th or 20th, I suddenly felt the overwhelming compulsion to pray. and I must have prayed for, 20 minutes or so. And then I thought it was all over. I didn't know what I was praying about, but I was feeling guilty about something. And I thought, well, I'll pray and I'll cover all the ground. And then the next day or two, it was 30 minutes. And then I would lean against the building before going into class with everyone watching. And I would pray. And then it was an hour, then 2 hours. I think the longest was 6 hours in a row.
8.
8 hours, yeah.
8 lying down in a field.
That's right, outside, when I was home for vacation, Easter
And
vacation.
they were terrified that you were dead, your parents.
And I couldn't say I was out there praying. I said I fell asleep, but my mother wouldn't have understood it. They had called the police. To skip ahead to the end of the 7.5 years of analysis, I was so afraid to feel free to enjoy my own life if my mother was sick and suffering every day of hers. And I didn't think I had the right. It wasn't there all the time, but if I got too happy, then it hit, and I had to pray. For what? I didn't know.
It's like the Kunahara. It's like somehow or other to get rid of the evil eye. You were praying for forgiveness. You don't know quite what for.
I didn't know why.
But your mother was suffering, so you didn't have a right to
Yeah.
be sort of free. Now, you wrote that compulsion is doing, obsession is thinking.
That's right.
This was the doing part.
Yeah.
And I thought of that when Leo Bloom had his blue blanket
Yes.
in The Producers.
Yeah, I don't have one.
But did you draw upon your understanding of obsessive doing?
Oh,
when you
yeah. See, at that time, I had studied with Uta Hagen, Herbert Berghoff. I wasn't happy. I studied with Lee Strasberg for 1 year and 2 months, and then I was accepted into the Actors Studio, and I studied there for 4.5 years. And when I came to that scene, I said, now, how am I going to do that blue blanket scene? And the first thing I thought of was this little dog I had. I got it from a friend who didn't want to have the dog anymore. Her name was Julie, and I was in Central Park, and I would throw the ball, a little rubber ball, and she'd run, and she'd come back, and I'd throw it again, and one time I threw it into one of the fountains. But this was in winter. There wasn't any water there. It was empty. And she didn't come out for the longest time, and when I went to get her, I saw blood coming down from her nose and her lip, and I hugged her so, and I said, what did I do? I was so dumb. Why did I throw it anywhere near? Took her to the vet, and she came out of it okay. But when I had to do that scene, and Zero was trying to take that blanket away from me, I just did a sense memory of the blanket, which they gave me, a soft, furry blanket. I was rubbing Julie against my cheek. Yeah. That's all. And when he put his hand in and tried to die, Jew, and then I got hysterical, and that was it. So it was just, it's an acting trick. That's all. But I mean, it's not a cheap trick. It's a real trick.
Really. About the praying, that raises the issue of Judaism and what part that has played in your life. You were raised in a household where both parents were Jewish, and your grandfather was the president of an Orthodox shul. What role did Judaism have to play in your childhood and your growing up?
In my childhood, there wasn't talk about God or philosophy. It was hugging and kissing.
That was religion.
That was religion to me, and it was confidence. I always knew that my parents loved me, and I was bar mitzvahed. Well, I did a mafter the year before. I hadn't a clue what the words meant, but I knew. I knew the melodies. I said, "Oh, I like that melody," and so I did it. And And then my voice changed when I had time for the bar mitzvah a year later, and no one bothered to say what all those Hebrew words meant. But later on, as I grew up, I remember I came back to Milwaukee and went to now a conservative temple that my father had joined, and my mother and father were there, and the rabbi came out and spoke in English, and he started defending what we were doing in Vietnam. And I said, I held myself back. I wanted to get up and say, "You foolish man, you don't know what you're talking about." And I said, if I do that, who'll pay? My mother and father will be the ones to pay. So I held my tongue. But I never went back to temple again. I went to, in a Reform temple, to see neighbors getting bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs. But for me now, as my favorite writer, Chekhov, would say, I have no religion. Not philosophically. Culturally, I do. But I have one religion. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's it.
Good enough. When my daughter Abigail interviewed you for her book, Stars of David, she asked you when in your life you have felt most Jewish. And you said when you're with Zero Mostel and Mel Brooks.
That's right. That's right.
And then when she asked how it felt to play two classic Jewish film roles, she was referring to the Rabbi and Frisco Kid and Leo Bloom and the producers, and you said you never thought of Leo as a Jewish role, but it probably was because Mel Brooks writes Jewishy, even when he doesn't write Jewish isms. Would you tell us the difference?
Oh, gosh. I mean, he was a Borscht Belt comic. When he was 14 years old, he went on, and I remember he told me, I didn't see it, he was wearing a beard. He went on stage in a little part, and the beard fell off. And he said to the audience, "What do you want? I'm only 14 years old." It was an all-Jewish audience, too. And all of his jokes, the way he thought of jokes, came about from the Borscht Belt. And then Sid Caesar wanted him to be along with him on your show of shows. And they didn't want him. Max,
Yeah, Max Liebman.
Yeah. He said, "Well, what do you need him for?" He said, I want that kid along. Mel, I think, was 21 then. Mm-hmm. And he got $50 a week, and that was it. And then he ended up being head writer years later. But the kind of humor that they were doing was my introduction, really, to Jewish humor. I wouldn't have called it that then, but when I saw Sid Caesar and Carl Reiner, I knew they're talking about, they're saying Japanese, what's happening there? Hasarai. I realized later that I was learning Jewish humor from Zero and Mel. And when Zero and I stayed inside the studio during the producers, everyone else went out to lunch somewhere. I just stayed with Zero, and he had a sandwich, I had a sandwich, and he would tell me about the blacklisting and things like that. And he was what I learned from both of them was audacity. I can't always do it, but they both were up on top and then went down to the bottom, and then they weren't afraid of authority figures anymore for the rest of their lives. And that was the influence, the Jewish influence.
Tell us how you prepared for the role of the rabbi in the Frisco Kid.
I asked for the help of two rabbis. One was from a conservative temple, and one was from a Reform, and then I wanted to have a cantor. And I asked if he would mind if I tape recorded him singing prayers. And then I kept that tape with me all the time when we were on location. And I studied it before we ever went on vacation, so I could say the prayers without looking at anything. I knew the words, I knew what the words meant, and I knew what the melodies were. And that's what got me through playing the part.
I was really astounded when I looked at the cover of the video of Blazing Saddles, that on the Indian headband, do you remember what it said?
Oh, gosh. I used to
Kosher
know.
lepesach.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
Mel was
Mel
always
was-
putting a little
yeah.
shtick in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
John Wayne almost played the part of Harrison Ford. What
He did.
happened?
He agreed to do it. Not until they gave him his usual salary, which was 10% of the gross and $1 million. And they balked at it and didn't. And then finally they said, yes, okay, do it. And I was so happy. And one of the executives got the bright idea of going out to Long Beach, California, where John Wayne lived, and tried to knock him down $250,000. And he said, forget the whole thing. And
Now,
he
who-
liked the script. He said, I love that little Jewish rabbi. But,
Can you imagine?
and it would have been perceived as a Western as opposed to a Jewish film. No, it was big in Florida. Anyway, it would have been nice to have done it with him. That would have been his last film, too.
Somebody in the memoir, somebody said of that incident that somebody tried to, quote, Jew him down, which
Yeah.
makes, I don't remember who that was, but
One of the Jewish
he
executives.
said that really.
Yeah.
Which I'm curious about your experience with anti-Semitism in your life or career. Do you remember incidents that?
For some
Certainly.
strange reason, my mother, who had now had 2 heart attacks, had a relative who lived in Los Angeles whose son was going to Black Fox Military Institute in Los Angeles. And she thought if she sent me there, I would learn about sex, which I already knew about, but I didn't bring up the subject with her. But I didn't have any experience, but I knew what was going on. And I would also learn about dancing, ballroom dancing, waltzes. I'd learn how to play the piano, because she was a pianist. And I think she was terribly influenced by Tyrone Power in The Diplomatic Courier. And she thought that maybe it would. So I went there, I was all excited. I thought, oh, we'll play war games and there'll be. And I got there and I was the only Jew. And they either beat me up or insulted me every day that I was there. And I came home for Christmas vacation and she said, play something for me. Well, the only piece I had worked on was, ironically, Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Seen. And she was so disappointed in how I was playing it that she left the room and went into her bedroom. And then my father said, better change for dinner now. I had my uniform on. And I went in, I took off my shirt and went in to see her, not realizing that my arms were covered with black and blue marks. And she saw it, and she gasped, and then she hugged me and said, can you forgive me? Please forgive me. I'm sorry, darling. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And that was my first experience in military academy. And then in junior high school, there was still some, they'd say, Jew boy, kike, things like that. But by the time I got to high school, I didn't encounter any more anti-Semitism.
But I wonder if that experience, that early experience, sensitized you to racism, because you talk about being very alert to the shoe polish scene in Silver Streak and
Yeah.
how that was changed as a result of Richard Pryor. Tell us about your relationship with Richard Pryor. You made 4 movies with him, yes?
Yes. It actually would have been 5 because Richard was one of the writers on Blazing Saddles. And he was going to play Black Bart, and Warner Brothers didn't want to take a chance on him. If they had, that would have been our first movie together. But Richard and I met on Silver Streak. I I had read the script in Paris, and I had to give an answer by, this was on a Saturday or Sunday, and I had to give an answer by Tuesday, and I said, yes, I want to do it. And when I got back to Los Angeles, Alan Ladd Jr., who was the head of 20th Century Fox, and a good friend then, I said, there's one scene, it's a corker, and I can only think of one person who can play the black man in it, and that's Richard Pryor. And he said, that's who we want. Mm-hmm. And so Richard and I met in Calgary, Canada, the night before the first day of shooting, and hugged and hugged. I love you, and I love you, and your work, and so on. And the next morning, we're filming our first scene, and he says the first line, I say the second line, and then he says another line that came out of God knows where. And I didn't think about what to answer. I just said something that came out naturally, and we were improvising, then back to the script, and back to the improvisation, and back. I had improvised in class before, but never in front of the camera or on stage with an audience. So he was my teacher in that respect, and because every film we did, he improvised, except the one that I wrote, which was See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Mm-hmm. There he didn't do, not in any scenes that I was in, he didn't improvise. And he was very good in that film, too. But that's how we got, but we didn't know each other socially.
Was he easy to work with or difficult?
He was very easy to work with when we were together. When he didn't come on time in Stir Crazy, and he was on whatever he was on, he nearly drove Sidney Poitier crazy. Mm. And if I knew Richard well enough by then to say if I blow up or say something, the film is going to shut down. And then in Silver Streak, that was a big one. That was the first one. We got into the men's bathroom in Toronto, Canada, and the director, Arthur Hiller, said, let's just run through that bathroom scene, just lightly, just to see where we're going to go with it. And we got in there, and I see Richard's getting somber, more somber, more somber. And on our way home to the Royal York Hotel, where we both were staying, I said, what's the matter? He said, too late. I said, tell me what's the matter. Too late. It's too late. I'm going to hurt a lot of black people. It's too late. I said, if you tell me what's wrong, I'll talk to Arthur Hiller. I'll talk to Alan Ladd Jr. Tell me it's too late. I said, well, I'm in room such and such and such. 15 minutes later, he called me. Can I come down and see you? I said, sure. He came down. I said, you're going to tell me what it is? Yeah. A white man comes into the men's room, sees you with shoe polish, assumes you're black, because that's how all niggers behave, and he makes some wisecrack. I said, yeah. And what should it be? He said, it should be a black man who comes in. You don't fool him for a second. He says, I don't know what your trouble is, mister, but you got to keep time to the music. And I said, well, that's a better scene. Well, didn't you read this script before? He said, well, sometimes I have people read it to me. It just never occurred to me till we went into the rehearsal for it. Otherwise, the scene, I think the film would have stopped that day. Anyway, we got to know each other on set, very friendly, very affectionate. Off set, we didn't see each other. He had his own crowd.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back and forth from questions from the audience here and the folks who are watching out there. And here's a question that I would have asked myself from the Gershman Y in Philadelphia. When you and Gilda met, was it love at first sight?
No, it was, first night was August 13th, 1981, and it was night shooting on the Hudson River. I was in a tuxedo, and her car pulled up, and she got out, and she told me later on that she was crying all the way in, because she was married at the time. And I said, why were you crying? And she said, because I knew I was going to fall in love with you. I said, no, come on. She said, no, I did. I knew it. I said, but that's crazy. How could you? And they never rewrote the part. It should have been a wonderful part for her, but she was still playing a Gentile part. It should have been a Gilda Radner part, and then we got to know each other, and then the film ended. She got on a plane back to Connecticut, and I said, oh, thank goodness. That girl would drive me crazy. And I went to my home in Los Angeles. The next day I went shopping for orange juice and toasted English muffins and Twining's Earl Grey tea. I met my lawyer for dinner, I think. I came home, took off my jacket, stared at the piano for about 20 seconds, got down on my knees, and pounded the floor. Pounded. And we'd had a little secret code that she gave me. She said, if ever you want to see me again, tell Bernie, my agent, the ducks are flying over the pond.
It's so Gilda.
And I called Bernie and I said, would you give a message to Gilda? Don't ask me what it means. The ducks are flying over the pond, and he did. And she called from a telephone booth near the AMP, and she couldn't talk in her home because her husband was there. It was a very sad marriage. She liked him a lot, but it was a hopeless marriage. And she would tell me about it and so on. And then I asked her to come and live with me, like a tryout. And
audition.
She was not an audition. No, I wanted to see if she was going to hold on to me, my arm, my sleeve, all the time, afraid of being alone. And it was exhausting. Gilda was a firefly. She'd light up a room, light up the sky, light up anywhere she was, and then the light would go out, and then it would appear somewhere else. And come on and light up, and she could wear you out because the energy was always there. Her spirit was constant. And then when my sister got breast cancer, and we were going to go to New York to see her and then on to France because I was tired and had just finished a film, and her dog,
Sparkle.
ate rat poison in this waiting room at the airport. And she said, she grabbed the dog, said, I'm going to go to a vet. You go on, go ahead, and I'll tell you what happens. You're tired, you need to go to France, all that. And then on the phone that night, she said, I have to give the dog a vitamin K shot every day for 10 days. And you need a rest, go on. Here was the corker. I love you, and I know you love me. I'll be fine. You go ahead. I'd been waiting to hear that for almost a year. Mm-hmm. I went away, and in the suitcase, there was a present. My birthday was then. And it was a watercolor block with 2 brushes and a little palette with some colors, watercolor colors. And it said, happy birthday. Mm-hmm. And I came back and I asked her to marry me. And then that was in 1984. In 1986, she got ovarian cancer. In 1989, she died. And was she the great love of my life? No, she was not. I tried to get rid of her until I couldn't live without her. And then when she got cancer, I never thought that she would die from it. I thought she'd lick it. I knew what she was getting and everything. I was stupid because everyone else seemed to know. But I didn't, thank goodness, because whenever she went too far and I just couldn't take it anymore, I would yell at her and she said, thank you. I know you wouldn't yell at me like that if you thought I was going to die. And then she died.
And you have used that tragedy to really aid the lives of many through the founding of Gildas Club.
Yeah.
Just give us a one-line summary of what Gildas Club does.
Well, Gilda had been used to going to the wellness community in Los Angeles, and everyone there was going because they had cancer, and they could all tell each other what their troubles were, and their wives, their husbands, and you weren't alone. And then she thought she was cured. She came to Connecticut, and she found out that the cancer was back. And she cried, not because the cancer was back, as much as because she had nowhere to go to. And when she died, although we had never talked about it, I talked with Joel Siegel, and we got a lady named Joanna Bull to come from Los Angeles and talk about starting, well, we named it Gildas Club, and it took 4.5 years of raising funds to get the first Gildas Club in New York started. Now there are about 16 all over the country, and there are 2 in England, and there are 2 in Canada.
Great.
And that, thank you. But I'll tell you quite honestly, the one who did most of the work was Joanna Bull. I could get a camera there, a photographer, interview, some magazine, and Ann Moore, who was the head of People magazine, helped a great deal. But 4.5 years, and now...
Well, you mentioned the love of your life, and I just want to say we know who that is. It's
Yes.
Karen.
I wish she were here tonight so she could hear this. Well, I'll tell her when I get home.
Karen is an extraordinary woman, and she's luminous. She's the firefly that stays lit.
Stays lit.
Tell us how you met Karen.
I've been offered a film called See No Evil, Hear No Evil. I said, this is a great idea, but it's a rotten script. They're pissing on the deaf and the blind. They don't know what they're talking about. And I turned it down. And 6 months later, my agent sent me the script again, and he said, the people that try, I said, don't you know I turned this down 6 months ago? It's a wonderful idea, but it's a rotten script. And a few months later, I changed agents, not because of that, for other reasons. And Marty Baum, my new agent, said, I want you to meet the people at TriStar Films about this script, See No Evil, Hear No Evil. I said, Marty, this is a joke. I've turned it down twice, I'm turning it down again. He said, I don't care if you turn it down, I want you to meet the people at TriStar. And they told me they wanted me to write it. I told them everything that was wrong with it, and they said, we agree with you. And would you write it for you and Richard Pryor? I said, I'll write 20 pages starting from the beginning. You like it? I'll go on. You don't like it? You don't owe me a penny. And so I wrote it, and they said, this is the film we want to make. And I said, now I've got to learn about the blind and the hearing impaired. And I had a secretary calling, it was then called the New York League for the Hard of Hearing. Now it's just the League for the Hard of Hearing. And I had an appointment to talk with a Ms. Webb. I said, oh, Jesus. This is a New England biddy who's going to say, you're making fun of the deaf. And I hear this voice on the phone, a beautiful voice. And she said, I liked your script, first draft, very much. I said, oh, well, thank you very much. This could do a lot of good for the people all over the country. It's filled with holes, you know. I said, well, yeah. I mean, that's why I wanted to talk to you, and made an appointment to go to the League for the Hard of Hearing. And out comes this, I won't say this beautiful girl, because she was a woman, wearing lavender and pink, little splash of blue here and there. And I went in, and she put me through tests for my hearing to know what it would be like. And she sent me to beginners, intermediate, and advanced lip reading, speech reading, they call it. And Then she became technical advisor on See No Evil, Hear No Evil. And she said, if I ever get the grant money, would you help me write a video for people all over the country who can't come to New York, but they could get a video in their hometown? And I said, sure. Well, then months passed. Gilda had died. Then that was in May, and in October, I think it was, I got a call from her. She said, you remember me? I said, yes, of course I remember you. I remember the dress very well, and the legs. And she said, I got the money. And can I send you the script we've got? I said, sure. She sent it. I read it. I called her. I said, this script is going to close on page 4. That's what Zero says in the producers.
Right.
I said, there's nothing but technical stuff. That how do you expect it? It needs some laughter. So we made an appointment to meet at this little Italian restaurant, 11 tables.
Armenia. I'm giving them a plug.
And she put the tape recorder on the table between us, and she had this brilliant idea of giving me problems that someone who's trying to read the lips of someone else might have. Like, for instance, the person is chewing gum. A man has a mustache covering his upper lip. The person is standing half in shadow. How do you read the lips then? So I would just improvise. She would type up everything, and we'd meet the next week. We did meet the next week. Tape recorder in the center of the table. More problems. I'd improvise. She'd go, type it up. The third week, I called her and I said, leave the tape recorder at home. It's like, put the candle back. And that was our first date. And then you know the rest.
Yes. A question from this audience. How did you get from Jerome Silverman to Gene Wilder?
I took a subway. I got accepted into the actor's studio, which I wanted to get into very badly. And I didn't want to be introduced to Elia Kazan and Shelley Winters and Rod Steiger and Paul Newman and all the rest of the group there as Jerry Silberman or Jerome Silberman. I thought, Jerry Silberman in Hamlet, I couldn't picture it. And my sister and brother-in-law had a friend who talked faster than anyone I'd ever met before, and he went through from A to Z, and when he got to W, he said Wilder. I said, wait, that's it. And then first names I thought came from Thomas Wolfe, Look Homeward, Angel, The Web and the Rock, You Can't Go Home Again. Eugene, but everyone who loved him called him Gene, and I thought that's the name I want. There were other reasons, but
then your therapist reminded you?
That my mother's name was Jean.
With a J.
Yeah, Jeanne. Never occurred to me.
Also, Our Town was your favorite?
Our Town was my favorite play, and Thornton Wilder, and that's why I chose Wilder.
Right. Let's run through a few really quick questions. Yeah. One from Salt Lake City. Did you ever become very attached to a character? Like hard to let go?
Oh, yes. In Young Frankenstein, I was very unhappy because of the circumstances of the marriage. I was married to, I think, a wonderful woman who had a daughter whom I loved, and it was a huge problem. I was always caught in the middle in fights between them, and I went off to do Young Frankenstein, and when it came to the end, near the end, Mel came into the bedroom set and saw me looking so sad, and he said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, "I want to stay in Transylvania." Meaning I didn't want to go back.
Right.
Well, I did go back, but then I did leave.
You adopted that daughter.
Yes, I did.
And if I may say so, because it's in your memoir, you are estranged from her. Is that still so?
Yes.
You'll have to read the memoir to understand that, 'cause
Yep.
it's more complex than a simple question.
Yep.
A question from Vale. What dramatic role would you like to do or like to have done?
There weren't many. I was offered several, but I came to the realization that there'd always be 14 other guys who would do it better than me. But if it was a comedy, I could hold my own. But when I saw Dustin Hoffman in, was the one about marriage and with Meryl Streep breaking up, I thought I would like to have played that, and I don't think I would have been good in it, but that was one I would like to. The one that I wanted to play the most, the very most, was called Magic. And Richard Attenborough was directing. My best pal, Terrence Marsh was the production designer, and William Goldman wrote the script about a ventriloquist who can't let go of the dummy. And I thought they didn't have anyone, and my friend Terry recommended me, and Richard Attenborough said, oh, he'd be wonderful in that. William Goldman said he'd be wonderful in that, and Joseph E. Levine said, I don't want any comedians in this. He was so wrong, because I'm not a comedian, but a comic actor, because that's what this very sad, dramatic script needed, was something to lighten the load so that you could get more affected by the drama. That part I would like, and they got Anthony Hopkins, who's one of my favorite actors, but it wasn't a good film. But that's one part I would like to have played.
Well, speaking of actors, there are two different questions from the Gershman Y in Philadelphia. You were brilliant in The Producers. What was it like filming with Zero Mostel? And another person asked, when you were making Blazing Saddles, what was it like to work with Mel Brooks? And did you ever work with Cleavon Little after that? So
I'll start at the end. I didn't work with Cleavon after that, but we got along wonderfully in Blazing Saddles. What was it like working with Zero? He just took care of me all the time. In our first PR, public relations luncheon, everyone had a name tag. I'd never been to one of these before, and there was Dick Shawn sitting next to Zero and the producer and Joseph E. Levine and Mel Brooks. And Zero came up, he took Dick Shawn's name tag, and mine was in another table way back, and he switched places. He picked me up every morning in the car that had been given to him with a chauffeur to work and back home, and he was an angel. What was it like to work with Mel? Heaven on a stick. The only troubles he had were if an actor, when he had Madeline Kahn and Marty Feldman and Cloris Leachman and Gene Wilder, he didn't have to do anything. He'd say, the camera's over there. But if he had actors who were not right for their parts, he'd give them line readings, and that was death for the actor, because they try to imitate Mel. Well, you can't imitate him and have it come out real. Anyway, but working with him every day was wonderful.
Here's obviously a film buff question from the Mandel JCC of Cleveland. In Haunted Honeymoon, you recreate Fred MacMurray's great scene in the cellar for Murder, He Says.
That's right.
And the hands holding the candelabras appear to be a reference to Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, this guy knows.
I know. I just want you to know there are great intellectuals out in Cleveland. What other films do you quote in Haunted Honeymoon, and why did you choose to reference those specific films?
I wanted to write a film about a spooky film, a horror film, but instead of special effects, I wanted to do everything in the camera. I was directing it, and I talked with my friend Terrence Marsh and with the photographer, and everything that you saw that was, a candle floating through the air, or anything that you say, whoa, special effects. They weren't special effects. They were all done in the camera. And I wanted to take from all the movies I'd seen when I was growing up, Ghost Breakers, not Ghostbusters, Ghost Breakers, Bob Hope, Paulette Goddard, and, everyone. I don't want to. He was right about the candelabra. I took everything from those silent, not some silent, but mostly, The Cat and the Canary. That was a big one, and I wrote the script around that. And so it was sort of like, I don't want to say homage to, but I wanted to do a unique film that didn't rely on special effects, but just do it all right there on the set.
Mm-hmm. This one, and from the audience here, what is your honest opinion of the recent version of The Producers?
Of The Producers. Are you talking about the musical?
This person asks about the movie, but you
Or the
might
movie?
answer both the movie and the play.
I loved I was
musical.
very nervous going to the musical. Mel wanted me to see it before it opened. Karen and I went, I think, 2 or 3 nights before, and my heart was pounding. What if I don't like it? What am I going to say to Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick? After 5 minutes, I was laughing along with everyone else. I loved it, and I loved the songs. I loved the dancing. I loved everything about it. And I went backstage, and Nathan was crying. And we hugged, and Matthew said, how did you do it? How did you do the hysterical? I said, Matthew, I did it in 2 takes. You have to do it 8 times a week. Anyway, then I saw the movie and didn't like it at all. It was a filmed stage production. It wasn't a movie.
Another movie question. You had a small but terrific part in Bonnie and Clyde. What was the impact of this film on your life? And what was it like working with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway?
It was just like a 5-minute part, and I didn't know what the point of view was. And I asked my agent, "Who's directing?" And she said, "Arthur Penn." I said, "Oh, well, he'll provide the point of view." And I did that part. I really liked it a lot. And Arthur. The great lesson in that was when we were doing interior of the car, not on location in Texas, but in Hollywood, and Arthur said, "Action." And I started talking. He said, wait. Gene, just because I say action doesn't mean you have to start. It means we're ready. But I see you got something cooking inside, so when you're ready, then you start. So I did the scene. It was very good, everything good, and the assistant director came up to me afterwards and said, "Don't get used to that, because you're not going to find it very often. Just Arthur Penn and maybe 1 or 2 others, but you won't find that very often." That had a big effect on me as far as the acting is concerned. And then Mike Nichols wanted me to do Catch-22 after he saw the outtakes from Bonnie and Clyde. And he said, "Promise me that you'll do it." I said, "If the script is right, certainly I'd like to work with you more than anyone." And I got the script, and the part of Milo Minderbinder was reduced to, it's not that it was reduced to 1 sentence, but the whole point of it was, I'm not doing anything bad. I want everyone to gain by selling the, and I said, "I can't do it, Mike." Because he said, "Well, if I did what you want, it would take 4 hours to do that film." "You mean you won't?" It was like Willy Wonka. "You won't do it?" And I said, "No, I won't." "Okay." And he said, "Maybe we'll do a blue movie together one day." And I realized later he was talking about Carnal Knowledge. But then he got Garfunkel.
Right.
And anyway.
But you make a point in the memoir that there were so many "if I hadn't" or "if I had" that life is a series of chance encounters and choices that one makes, and your whole life could be changed by one choice.
That's right.
And so many times you trace how one thing led to another thing to
Right.
another thing. So what were the key kind of turning points that led from one thing to another?
I was miscast in my first big part on Broadway in Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage, starring Anne Bancroft. And Anne said to me one night after a show, "Would you like to meet my boyfriend, Mel Brooks?" And I said, "I certainly would." And after the curtain came down, I went to her dressing room, and there was Mel Brooks wearing a merchant marine pea jacket, black jacket, and he looked striking in it. And I said, hello, how nice to meet you. My goodness, you look so wonderful in that pea jacket. He said, yeah, they used to call them urine jackets, but they didn't sell.
Just a couple more questions. One from Salt Lake City, Utah, of all places, because listen to this. We are Russian Jews who have come to the United States in 1991. Could you tell us about your parents? When did they come to this country? What did they do? And have you ever learned the Russian language?
My father was born in Russia and came to Milwaukee, Wisconsin when he was 11 years old. My mother was born in Chicago, but her mother and father came from Poland. It was Poland one year and Russia the next year. But she was born in Chicago, and what was the last part of the question?
Did you ever learn to speak Russian?
I never learned to speak Russian except my grandfather, when I would go there when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, he'd say, "Nu, Jerry," that was my name then, "Sprachachotzi?" And I thought he was talking Yiddish, but I think it was Russian. I think so.
You couldn't speak Yiddish?
No, I knew the Yiddish that, I'm a shugana,
Right.
you know, or...
Well, here's a card, in fact. If I say Tata darling, Tatala darling, what would your response be? Is there a meaning to this question that I don't know? Does Tatala mean?
Tatala...
I know what Tatala means,
yeah.
but is it big in your life?
No, Tatala, darling.
Okay, I don't understand. We thank you for the question. What film are you proudest of working on?
Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein. Yeah. And what do you miss most about acting?
What do I
Anything?
miss most? No, nothing.
And the last question in the producers, your character says, "I want everything I've seen in the movies."
I've ever seen in the movies.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have everything you've ever seen in the movies in your life?
More.
Thank you.